Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea. You know, we've seen some of the success that other industries have had in other policy areas. So I remember the campaign that was put on our television screens from the mining industry when there was a policy change that was being directed at the mining industry several years ago, the mining tax. That was incredibly successful, and I think that the same sort of success can be used in other areas where you're saying, look, you know, rather than trying to beat a particular policy proposal that might be put up, we actually want to recruit people to the industry. I think that's a really, really good idea. But the other thing that I think is probably happening is some of those young people are looking at what's happening in automation and they're recognising, as they should be, that in 20 or 30 or 40 years' time, some of these jobs may actually not exist. So one of the things we've got to be really careful about is over-capitalisation, over-expenditure, over-education in some areas where some of those industries are going to go the same way that, for instance, the taxi industry has gone, where a new platform is going to come along, a new application will come along. There's robotics that can do brickwork, for instance, in a way that's much, much faster than brickies can. So we also don't want these young people going into these industries thinking that these are jobs that are going to exist for the rest of their lives when they're not. So I'm not panicking like Aki are. I think that to some extent this is just naturally going to occur as people recognise that automation is going to take over some of these jobs.
And you know, Paul, the problem with this is if you get it wrong, if you don't fill this massive skill shortage that we have in some industries, where we end up getting these guys from is from, you know, some two-bit country on a 457 visa. These guys come over here, they don't understand any of the rights, they don't understand any of the things that's going on, and mate, they end up getting hurt on building sites and whatnot. So, you know, if we're not proactive about this, further down the track, we're going to have a real rod for our own backs.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's this thing where you've got to have a conversation about pride, but also too, you know, as a couple of people on Twitter have said too, it's not just about being cooks. You know, we need plumbers, we need electricians, stuff that there's not necessarily a telly show about. But Rita, super producer Chris just said in my year, you know, what if kids watch this program all the time? What, they grow up wanting to be fat with an opinion? It's a good career, kids. You don't need a piece of paper for it.
To wear a tie. It's fantastic.
I think we all agree I've got the best job in Australia.
You've got to look at the costs to the country as well, because when we talk about junk degrees and people opting to go to university perhaps because, you know, that's what's expected of them and they end up doing some arts degree that's not going to get them anywhere. They're not only saddled with a debt and also a degree that may not get them a job, but the taxpayer is also saddled with an enormous amount of money because that is a subsidised education. So I think we've really got to rethink just our whole approach to what kids do after school, and this sort of herding them all into university, whether they're academically inclined or not, is something that has to be reconsidered because it is costly for the country as well as for the individual student.
Absolutely. In Queensland today, after hitting the 47-seat mark yesterday, looks like the Palaszczuk government could end up with 48 seats, a nice little double buffer, meaning that it would be 2 scandals, 2 heart attacks to lose a majority. It's something they definitely want. The Greens think they've locked in their first seat, which now means that more people voted for One Nation than the Greens, but there will be 1 member from One Nation, 1 member for the Greens. But of course, there'll be no negative coverage about the Greens winning a seat in Queensland. No giant surprise there. But I mean, for Anastasia Palaszczuk, yet again, and the reason we keep talking about it is because it ain't finally done yet. It is a pretty amazing achievement, isn't it, Rita Breheny, where I've got to say a politician of no particular note ends up increasing the number of seats and gets in now to a position where, you know, again, scandals or heart attacks to one side, she can do what she wants because there's no upper house in Queensland, which means things like 50-50 renewables, all of that stuff that a lot of people may have feared, it now becomes the law of the land in Queensland.
Yeah, it's you've got to give us some credit for this because 6 months ago we probably didn't think this was going to happen, but the coalition did run a terrible campaign, and it is, you know, you look at the Greens result, they were the only party, the only option at the polls for people who were against Adani. All the other parties were pro-Adani, and they were the only ones also during this whole Manus Island debate who were saying bring the asylum seekers here. And despite those 2 big issues, one of them national, one of them state-based, they still only got, what, less than 10% of the vote. So you've got to look at their result and the real support for them, because so much of the attention has been on One Nation's poorer than expected result, and the Greens have been heralded for winning a seat. But when you look at less than 1 in 10 votes, I don't think it's a great endorsement.
I also think where to from here for the party, I think they've got to go with a clean-skinned leader. They've got to go with somebody who probably wasn't a high-profile minister in previous governments, because you have to see that a winning strategy of 2015 and a winning strategy of 2017 would be attempted to be replicated in 4 years' time. So you don't want to run on the record of previous governments. You want to run as a clean-skin Liberal leader. So whether it's Tim Mander or somebody like that, we'll wait and see. But it is a lesson, as I said, Simon Breheny, is that if Conservatives and the Liberal Party, they're going to understand the Labor Party election-winning machine is red hot at the moment. It is red hot, and it is doing very well. The fact that in South Australia they may well end up holding on is amazing. And also, I want to tell people about a poll that came out today in Tasmania, right, where the preferred premier is now the Labor Party's White, 48 to Hodgman 35, and the primary vote right now in Tasmania is the Libs on 34, Labor on 34, Greens on 17 and Jackie Lambie on 8%. So that may well be the next of the blue states that goes red in the next little while, and people need to pay attention to the Labor Party machine, because whatever sugar hit Malcolm Turnbull thinks he gets out of a Thursday in December, it's going to be gone by the time that machine comes for him.
Yeah, well, look, I think the Labor Party for a number of years now have been sharpening up their campaigning strategies internally, but I also think that what's going on is that the Liberal Party, in both the state level and at the Commonwealth level, is really losing their focus on what a Liberal policy looks like. Unfortunately, I think you look around the country and you wonder, what is the difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party? This is why we're seeing people like Pauline Hanson, for instance, gaining traction both at the federal level and in Queensland. Even though the result in Queensland wasn't as significant as they were hoping, they still got 13% of the vote, which is a pretty large chunk of that vote. In other states, you've got people like Nick Xenophon, for instance. It'll be really interesting to see how Cory Bernardi goes. There are these other parties that are doing quite well, and part of the reason for that is people are actually looking for parties that represent their values. They're not seeing that from the major parties, and the major parties, because politics has become such a science these days, and you can focus group test to death any political idea, any policy idea. Unfortunately, it means that sometimes those values that underpin why a party was established in the first place go out the window. So I think it's actually a mistake, because people want for their political parties to have a really clear vision into the future. They want for them to have really clear principles, and they want them to stick by those principles. They'll give you respect even if they disagree with you. That's the really interesting thing about politics. Even if people disagree with you, they're likely to respect you, and they might even vote for you if you've actually got a really clear vision, a clear set of policies to take forward to the electorate.
Well, look, I'm going to go to a break in a second, but Sam, I won't let you do a victory lap for the Queensland Labor Party, but I want to talk about Tasmania and one part here. If that Labor MP, who's currently the MP for Braddon, goes because of High Court dual citizenship, we'll see what happens. They say there's no case to answer, but we'll see what happens. Yep. Jackie Lambie's sitting at 8%. Yep. Now, this is the amazing factor, right, is that we've got Xenophon in South Australia, we've got, One Nation in Queensland, we've got Australian Conservatives that I think is going to do a lot better in New South Wales and Victoria than a lot of people want to give it credit. Lambie at 8% could help decide lower house seats.
Absolutely. It will help decide lower house seats.
I mean, she is a locked-in anti-government vote when she's been in the Senate, so you've got to imagine that there's going to be a relationship potentially with Labor. But that is a fascinating insight of what is going to happen potentially in Tasmania.
Look, I agree. I've said, I'm a little bit closer to the Tasmanian situation. I've known Beck White, the Labor leader down there, for a little while, and I think she's phenomenal. She's telegenic, she's engaging, she can carry an argument. I said as soon as she got up that we were in with a real shot down there. But no, look, you're absolutely right. One Nation is not a factor in Tasmania. The Greens absolutely are. Jackie Lambie absolutely is as well. Now, how her preferences go, she can't just go to Labor. It's never as clean and as simple as that. But finally, to pick up on Simon's point, I think he's absolutely dead right. More and more, and I think we saw this at the last election with Labor on negative gearing, a supposedly unpopular policy that no one could touch, and it was electoral suicide. If you just calmly and rationally explain to people why you're doing it, they will respect you for doing that. They will respect you for going through that process. So I think there's a real lesson in that for every single government and opposition, that you can take the Australian people with you in a difficult decision like that.
Or if nothing else, you can just steal the Labor Party idea. Which seems to be the Banking Royal Commission.
That'll do it too.
Yeah, all right, quick break. Back with more. Plenty to talk about here on Paul Murray Live. Don't forget, you can also jump onto the Facebook page. Just go searching for Paul Murray Live. Now, let's talk about a new camera that might be coming towards our roads. Now, we know we've got them for speed cameras, safety cameras, red light cameras, all the rest of it here. Have a look at this, though. This is some pretty amazing tech that will now be able to pick up if you use your mobile phone while driving. This was tested in lots of different places, but obviously this one company has got an incredible hit today because it's been credited as Victorian technology, Sydney technology, Brisbane technology, so there's been obviously a very media rollout today. But on one of the tests that they did on a pretty popular road in Sydney, they caught people using their phones every 49 seconds. Is what they were able to do. It's basically a camera that takes an awful lot of images, matches them up and can work out if somebody is looking at the phone or not. Therefore, they can ping all sorts of drivers. I think it's an amazing piece of technology, and I say that as somebody who has been pinged for using their mobile phone while driving. I lost 4 points for it. Stupid and unforgivable thing to do, so, you know, it's illegal. I don't have a problem with tech wiping out stuff like this. What do you reckon, Sam?
Yeah, Paul, I'm with you. Frankly, I'm shitting myself when this thing comes in, because I have been known once or twice at the lights, and you sort of keep finishing the message as you know. And look, I'll probably get pinged at some stage because it is wrong and it
Get
is
a new
stupid.
Kia. We have good friends at Kia. The Apple CarPlay. You can dictate your messages on the phone.
Okay.
In the car. Do that.
But, you know, at some stage I'm going to get done and I'm going to get shitty then, but then, you know, I might actually put the phone away. So good.
Correct.
Good.
Rita, what do you think about this here? I mean, look, it also all depends. Is this going to be one of those secret squirrel cameras that nobody sees, therefore it pings lots of people? Or will there be 100 warnings, meaning it's reminding you not to do it, but then as soon as you go past it, people will go, I'm in the clear now. What do you think of this?
No, I hope they do actually have warnings, but perhaps not say, you know, precisely where they are, but say they're going to be rolled out, and, you know, hopefully that will be enough of a deterrence for people. You don't need to get the fine in the mail before you change your behaviour, because, yeah, the pictures are pretty clear and you're going to have a hard time arguing that before a magistrate. What are you going to say? I was just moving my phone from one side of the seat to the other. You know, you touch your phone whilst you're in the car, they'll get you. You're not even supposed to just be holding it, even if you're not using it. If you're just, you know, one of those people who uses like a blankie and needs to have it in your hand, you'll get done.
Well,
Don't do it.
It's this thing where it's like, you know, I'm not just, you know, tut-tutting because, you know, it's naughty. Like, this stuff kills people, right? Like, it's up there with drink driving, speeding and all the rest of it. So it's like, Simon, nobody's going to sit here and advocate about, you know, why you should keep using your mobile phone, but good on the people who've invented the tech, not just to warn us about it, but to actually ping people about it. Because let's be honest, that's what changes people's behaviour, when they know they are going to get pinged.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit sceptical whether people will change their behaviour. I reckon, I mean, the chances of you getting fined are pretty low. It's just like anything else, and, you know, it's not like speed cameras have stopped speeding on the road. So I think that this is probably going to be the same sort of thing. It'll raise a heap of revenue for state governments, but I'm not sure it'll have that much of an impact on drivers. And
I think it will, Simon. I'll tell you why. Because, you know, with up until now, the only way you can really get caught if you've got a copper next to you who sees you with a phone in your hand. It's not something where, you know, you can use cameras, red light cameras, speed cameras. Yeah, that copper has to be there. So this actually puts it into...
That's true in Australia, but in the UK and other places around the world, there are these cameras that get you from like 100 metres away, and they can tell whether you're looking at your phone or not. So there is this technology in other parts of the world. Frankly, I haven't looked at whether or not, when they've used that technology, when they've introduced it, it's actually changed behaviour. But I'm sceptical. I reckon it'll cost people a heap of money, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure it's going to eradicate it. I think the more likely scenario is that we'll just move beyond smartphones, which sort of, you know, one day we'll sort of look back at these and think that they're an ancient piece of technology, and we'll have something that will be right in front of our faces where, you know, maps and that sort of thing will just come up in front of you rather than being on a little device you've got to keep looking down at. I think this is an incredible outrage. I just cannot believe that this bill is being sent to the promoter of Milo Yiannopoulos. It's got nothing to do with who might have been speaking. It's got nothing to do with how controversial their ideas are. The criminal conduct and all of that unsociability that you see during protests has occurred at these events, but it's been caused by the protesters. It hasn't been caused by the attendees at these events. So in cases where people have chosen to throw you know, rocks and bottles and try and stop people getting into a private function space, for the police then to turn around and to blame the promoter, I just think is incredible. I honestly can't believe it. And it looked today like the police minister and the Victorian government were gloating over having sent this $50,000 bill to the promoter. You know, I just think that they're trying to use this for their own ideological ends. I think they've totally lost the principle of this. What's happened to protecting private property rights and this sort of thing? If this is the way that Victoria Police is going to operate, then what's the incentive that they put in place for these sorts of people to go and shut down anyone that they disagree with? And as Rita said, this is something that can be used as a tactic on both sides of the equation. Having said that, it's pretty unlikely that you'll get a group of people blocking, you know, an Aboriginal land rights speaker, Sam. I've got to say, it's much more likely.
Clementine Ford or some far left speaker.
It's much more likely to happen to someone like Milo, but the principle should be exactly the same. And I think that, frankly, if a bill's going to be sent anywhere, it should be sent to the organisers of the protest.